Allow me to say my hello. Good early morning to our friends in North and South America. Good afternoon to our friends in the UK and Europe. Good early evening, our friends in Dubai, the Arab states. Good evening to our friends in Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, Indonesia. And good late evening to our friends in Australia. Hope you are well. So I believe we have some questions. Shinxiang?
Hi, Ajahn. Recollection of death makes me feel depressed. I find life is meaningless. How could we do this practice and at the same time be positive with regards to life? Thank you.
Interesting question, good question, and requires a nuanced answer. I think the degree to which we identify with the body is obviously a lot. And so when we meditate on the inevitable death of the body, there's that sense of it's all going to be over, nothing matters. And it is good to challenge this a bit. The way I've done a lot of death meditation and I've looked at a lot of corpses, I've been to a lot of funeral pyres, I tend to see death now as a moment. And my kind of own understanding of consciousness continuing is very palpable. And that may have also something to do with having had, I don't know, hundreds of dreams of ghosts over 26 years. When the body dies, mind continues. And the death reflection is to remind us to not take this life for granted. Whatever opportunities that you have that are good opportunities, whatever blessings have manifested in your life, then being aware that that could change. But Lord Buddha explained that his teaching was neither nihilism or eternalism. So people who are very identified with their bodies, when they contemplate death and impermanence, can tend towards that nihilistic sense. It's all going to be over. Doom and gloom. The times when it's appropriate for most lay people to do death meditation is like if you're getting compulsively obsessively concerned with the future and plans. It's like one has to remind oneself, I might die today. If you're holding onto a grudge and you're really, really angry, I might die today. And you ask yourself, do I want to die with this mind state? And the reason one asks oneself, do you want to die with this mind state, is that one should also ideally be aware of rebirth. Because you have to then ask yourself, if I die with this mind state, where will my likely birth be? So there's times where we use the death meditation to sober the mind, to bring extra clarity, and to drop various forms of unskillfulness. That's in kind of daily life. In times of retreat, in times, or some people may be semi-retired or retired or trying to intensify and deepen their practice, in terms of taking on awareness of death as one of one's main practices, it is usually taught in a package with other contemplations. So Buddhanusati, awareness of the Buddha's enlightenment and having faith in it, And then along with that comes the faith in one's own abilities to be liberated, purified, experience the same results from practice that he did. So this quality of faith is very joyful, gives confidence, and one needs to have it. The other one is metta. So one has loving kindness for oneself and for as many other beings as possible. And these two practices, particularly metta and death meditation, are kind of balance one another. So if the mind does fall into kind of a heavy depressed, if it's falling into dejection, depression, then one needs to do quite a bit of metta. And interestingly, though, this is where I said this question requires a nuanced answer. When one deepens one's practice and gets really serious about wanting to get liberated from conditioned reality and realize the unconditioned, one wants to be liberated from conditions that die and experience the deathless, then weariness plays an important role. And this is something that we need to be reminded of sometimes. And if you look at the Cardinal Suttas, the first three main teachings, at the end of looking at the very last paragraph, it describes a very interesting process in that paragraph. When Lord Buddha was explaining the Four Noble Truths, actually it's not, I don't think it's the fire sermon and the sutra on not self. The Anya Kondanya had the insight that all conditions that have the nature to arise have the nature to cease, and he entered stream entry. So that's an important thing to remember as well. Awareness of the death of the body. All the conditions that are of the nature to arise are of the nature to cease. Having a true, direct, clear insight into that can lead to experiencing nibbana and entering the stream. So it's good to have certain other qualities need to be present, like faith in the value of the practice, or how powerful this is, what it could lead to. But in the next teaching that Lord Buddha taught to the 5 first disciples, the Untitled Sutta, in going through the 5 khandhas, sense spaces, and asking them, is there a self there? When they saw that it wasn't a self, and that also there was a lot of suffering associated with bodies, feelings, consciousness, etc. The last paragraph states, weariness arose in their minds. That weariness led to dispassion. Through dispassion, their minds were purified and liberated. So it's a very, very interesting couple of sentences. Weariness, dispassion, purification, liberation. So in some respects, we need to look at our relationship with weariness and dispassion and understand their potential, and also the function they play in the process of getting enlightened. So this person is asking, how can they be positive about life if the mind gets depressed? So it's tricky. Like in Buddhist practice, Theravada Buddhism isn't the most popular religion in the world for some good reason. Not everybody wants to be a grown-up, mature, spiritual warrior. People want to pray. People want to blame. And in Theravada Buddhism, we have to take responsibility. Firstly, we have to recognize the situation we're in truthfully. And we have to take responsibility for the part that we play in it. And we have to get serious about liberating ourselves because no one else is going to. And the good news is it's perfectly possible if one does cultivate the Eightfold Path, have insight into the Four Noble Truths. So we're not trying to be happy, is a point I'm trying to make. We do want to experience a certain amount of well-being, contentment, moments and periods of peacefulness. But we are also taking it on the chin that the conditioned world is unsatisfactory. Sometimes it's kind of described as people who are trying to be happy in a kind of a worldly way. It's like rearranging the furniture on the Titanic as it's sinking. It's like the boat is going to sink. You only get so much happiness from these realms. Lord Buddha does explain, however, that peacefulness is the highest happiness. This is something that we have to train ourselves to understand, and we have to familiarize ourselves with enough peacefulness to get it. Oh, this really is better. Contentment, well-being, periods of peacefulness is much more fulfilling than fleeting excitement or sensuality. But that's something that one only develops confidence in when one experiences something, and that's where our disciplined meditation comes. So when we are disciplined in our meditation, we experience more moments of peacefulness, greater clarity, sense of presence of mind, less reactivity, more balance, equilibrium, serenity. Then what often happens is a sense of one develops a bit of resistance to going into agitated situations that we used to perceive as happiness. You don't want to go to the party where people are drinking and gossiping and insulting one another, showing off their status symbols. It's being competitive. It's like, no, you want to stay home and come home, like deep inside oneself. And I had an experience. It's a bit of a rambling answer, but I'm assuming that it'll be helpful to some people, so I'll continue to ramble. When I was a junior monk at Ajahn monastery 24 years ago, I was experiencing a kind of a sadness that I didn't really understand, and it was a very heavy sadness, and I was a bit worried about myself. Well, and what I found was I would try to make the heart and the mind bigger, and the sadness would fill that. And so I tried to make the heart and the mind bigger again, and the sadness would fill it. And I was wondering, is this depression? But I'd been depressed, and it didn't seem like depression because there was also a quality of peacefulness. And so I went and I asked my teacher, Ajahn, I'm experiencing this in meditation, what is it? And he said it's samvega in Pali, spiritual sadness. And he said the peacefulness that you're feeling is a type of tranquility. And he said it was a good sign. But this is sometimes why you need to have a good teacher, because I didn't know it was a good sign. I was thinking, what's all this sadness about? But we need to understand, if you start to correctly perceive that all conditions are unsatisfactory, it's a little bit sad, right? And what happens in the process of becoming weary and developing some spiritual sadness is all of those kind of mind's tentacles that have been flying out into fantasies about what sensual experiences or what material possessions or what combinations of relationships or promotions or career, whatever it is. All of the attachment to what one hopes to gain from samsara, when one realizes that it only ever gets so good and that it's never going to be completely fulfilling, what happens is that energy has to come back inside. This is an important part of the process. Weariness, spiritual sadness. The next thing is purification. So this process of purification is sobering up. I can only expect so much from this. What happens is when the mind begins to sober, you start to experience beautiful, pristine, clear sobriety. And that's wonderful. Equanimity, equipoise, serenity, understanding the nature of conditions, not being contentious, understanding the drawbacks of samsara, pulling more inward. That's what makes samadhi possible. That's what makes a truly collected mind possible, is that it's sobered up, got realistic about its expectations of what it can experience, the happiness that can be found in samsara, got much more serious about cultivating the happiness, peacefulness that can be experienced in meditation. So there's weariness and sadness can play a very helpful role. And so what happened after Ajahn gave me this perspective that this was a helpful thing and to trust it, I found that the sadness got so vast, like the sky. It got so vast that it just squashed the sense of self, and the sense of self fell away. And then all that was left was peace. So it was like this worrying about it. What is this? What is this? Is this okay? Am I okay? Doubt, resistance. When I trusted it and really opened to it, it led to some very deep states of peacefulness, really deliciously peaceful. And now I actually miss that mind state. It'd be really helpful to have that. Sometimes it would be really helpful to have that kind of profound sadness that just makes concepts of Ajahn fall away from my mind. What happens is the longer you keep good precepts and cultivate merit and develop metta, is Luang Por Chah would talk about this. You develop a kind of a happiness which is like a deva-like state. You can start to experience a fairly consistent well-being. So you can get sad by things, you can react a bit to things, but the mind's inner goodness and merits kind of brighten it up and stabilize it more quickly. And you develop a kind of a resilient well-being. And this can actually be a bit of an obstruction, because we get comfortable again. We get comfortable with our virtue and our metta, our wise perspective, our capacity to let go. And so I sometimes miss the urgency and the sadness, because I can get over things pretty quickly now. And so yeah, as to recap, metta practice is a balance to death reflection. And one should be mindful that the death reflection is to sober the mind, to increase clarity, to help qualities such as heedlessness become less. And to be mindful that unless one has established the mind in the deathless, the next thing that occurs after death is rebirth. So it's not the end. And but focusing on the fact that the body is going to die because we're so identified with it, focusing upon that does tend to help most people's minds experience more clarity, more stillness, more sobriety. And Ajahn, my main teacher, most people know, I think he did death meditation for the first 4 years of his bhikkhu life as his main practice. But and got very good results. He could experience a state on the verge of absorbing into jhana for months. So, we kind of like it in retreats and stuff when we experience some neighborhood concentration for a few minutes. So Ajahn became so adept, but then he was using awareness of death to just kind of, the mind would drop the hindrances, the mind would become cool and settled and sober. And he'd go to sleep in that state and wake up in that state. And it was later on that he did body contemplation and developed more profound samadhi, but he got very good results, experienced a lot of peacefulness from doing death meditation as his main practice. So again, just to say that it does have incredible potential. What would have been the case in Ajahn Anand's case is that he was living with a great arahant, he would have been receiving the metta of Lompocha, and he would have had tremendous faith in Ajahn Chah. So you've got that kind of container. You've got this great master with metta, you've got this great faith, so you can do a lot of death meditation. Anyway, probably said enough about that. May you all continue to grow in your cultivation of metta, buddhanusati, death meditation, and breath meditation. Those are the four main practices that breath meditation for peacefulness, buddhanusati for faith in the path and the goal, death meditation for decreasing attachments, metta meditation for brightening and gladdening the mind, increasing merits.
Ajahn, question 2. Dear Ajahn, is there a reason why India, where the Buddhist holy sites are located, is so poor and underdeveloped? It really seems quite ironic that there's so much suffering at the holiest places on earth. Can Ajahn please share your thoughts on this? Thank you.
All of the beings that had enough merits and spiritual qualities to be liberated in that area have been, and that's what's left. No, that's a bit simplistic. So Lord Buddha does teach that change is the one constant we can expect in the conditions. So a great number of beings did become established and enlightened and did become enlightened in those regions, which is one of the reasons that people with a little bit of sensitive mind and a little bit of faith go and meditate in these holy sites, and they tend to be able to experience more peacefulness than they would normally. Many people have that. It's a bit of a surprise, because what you might see outside are beggars and dressed in rags, filthy, excrement, mucus, sick people, lots of unwashed, rude people. In general, it's getting a bit better. It used to be quite rough. And then you go inside and pay respects and think of the Buddha, and the mind becomes very bright, peaceful, glad. So the blessings of what occurred in those places is still there to some degree. And most people who have some faith and some sensitivity will feel it, despite all the other stuff that's there as well. So it's inevitable, keeping in mind that this Buddha came in what is called the degenerating age. So the Buddhas who spend 4 incalculable periods plus 100,000 eons will tend to be born at the point in the eon where the maximum lifespan is about 100, and where virtue is degenerating. In the age where virtue is degenerating, the darkening part of the eon, things such as wars, famines, pestilence are common. So because Shakyamuni Buddha, Gautama Buddha spent 4 incalculable periods plus 100,000 eons cultivating his qualities, merits, and virtue, he was enlightened during this period of time. Thank goodness for us. If you imagine this world with all of its misery without the Buddha's teachings in it, wow. Anyway, he came 2,600 years ago, thank goodness. But it was always going to be the case that there was going to be growth and degeneration. And so beings who didn't have enough merit to become arahants, or who got established on lower levels, as the conditions degenerate in those original areas and the Buddhism flourished in other areas, so it really flourished in the Afghanistan, Pakistan area. The Gandhara kingdom was the center of Buddhism for 4 or 5 centuries. And then it spread from that along the Silk Trail, China, Korea, Mongolia, Japan. And then King Asoka sent out missionaries and spread Buddhism to Burma, Thailand, Cambodia, Sri Lanka. And so it really flourished in other places, for many centuries. A great numbers of arahants in all of those places. So the places are holy because of what occurred there in recent history. And the nature of flux and the nature of change is still valid, still active. And I've heard some of the masters in Thailand in recent history have said that two places in particular, Australia and Russia, will be large centers for Buddhism in about 300 years. So it isn't over yet. It's continuing to move around. And so what happens is beings who have karmic affinities will be born in the place where Buddhism has spread to. And the color of their skin and the color of their eyes and the language they're speaking may change. But their tendency to have faith and to want to practice virtue, cultivate their minds, will be still there. And so I have some teachers who have abilities in recollecting past lives, and some of them occasionally mention something to me. So one of my teachers mentioned that I'd been his younger brother in Thailand 500 years ago. And I had a dream. I had a dream of being a monk in Afghanistan 1,500 years ago. And so this white, pinkish body was brown 500 years ago, and whitish, like those Aryan, like Kashmiri people. Was like what do they call them? Aryans, I guess. In Thai, they call them white Indians. The cat cow, the people up in Kashmir area, the fair skin and the bluish green eyes. So we change our bodies and go according to our merits or our karma. And was thinking about the Katina ceremony. We had this Katina ceremony. I was thinking how kind of it's wonderful and it's also horrible. Shouldn't say that, should I? Too truthful sometimes. You have to go from we're meditation monks, right? And we try to live sense-restrained, simple, quiet, peaceful lives. And with 5 monks and about 10 lay people on most days, maybe 20 on the weekend. And then all of a sudden we have to receive 300 guests. So it's a bit of a shock to the sensitive mind. And then while you're setting up the facilities, I mean, that's quite a gig, right? In terms of event hosting, okay, you've got 30 bhikkhus and 300 lay people. People come and ask me, also, you don't get RSVPs, you never know exactly how many are coming. People say, how many people are coming, Ajahn? People trying to prepare the food. And I'm like, somewhere between 200 and 500. And that's all you can tell them. So, but I was reflecting on the Buddha's wisdom. You know, I think if the monks were left to themselves, as their minds became more sensitive, they would incline more and more to going further up the mountain, eating simpler and simpler food, and they'd become leaf and berry eating forest hermits. And then what would happen is, you know, a king would have a different religion and persecute the Buddhists, and the religion would die quickly. But because Lord Buddha established these various traditions, the monks must go for alms round. So we see the lay people see us. The monks should give some teaching once a week on the lunar observance days. And the monks do have to come together and sew a robe. The lay people offer a robe, so we come together for this Katina ceremony. But the end result is the lay people know us, we know the lay people. We're looking, after a period of retreat, we have to look at each other's faces, we have to talk, we have to communicate, we have to be able to relate harmoniously and cooperate. And so 2,600 years later, we still have Theravada Buddhism. And it's kind of decentralized as well. So when you think of Ajahn Chah's branch monasteries, I think there's 300 in Thailand, but on average, they probably have 3 or 4 monks. Some big training monasteries have more, but you have hundreds of small hermitages. And so if the monks are persecuted in one area, they just go to another area. It's difficult to get rid of us all. But wherever we go, if we behaved properly, we tend to be supported. So that's the wisdom of the Buddha, understanding how to keep us cooperating and working together, and lay people understand what the monks are trying to do, and the monks are encouraging the lay people to practice. It keeps going. And may the Buddha Sasana stay in the world for a long, long time. And may we all be born wherever it is that it's being practiced well, where the teachings are pure and the practitioners are practicing well, and where there are masters capable of teaching us. May we all be born in those places. I sometimes wonder if the present state of Bihar might be Mara's revenge for the Buddha's enlightenment and all of the arahants in that area. It's the place of enlightenment, and it's the place where Mara's armies manifested with might. And it's still a bit like that today. So. And if life permits, I'll be returning to Bodh Gaya myself on the 20th of November for a month. 6 weeks, actually. It was going to be a month. And turns out, I found out that His Holiness the Dalai Lama will be coming to Bodh Gaya, and I've been invited to attend a seminar with him. And for 3 days, 25th, 26th, 27th of December, so I decided to extend my stay. So a couple of people who I'm looking at are going to be joining me there for a period of time. If anybody really wanted to go to Bodh Gaya at some point, but didn't want to go without knowing somebody there, you have your opportunity now. 6 weeks will be there. Michi Amy's coming, and Ashoka is coming. Aprajita is going to come for a little while. Shunjian is going to come for a while. Chai Ek's going to come for a while. My buddies. So if you can get it together, come and join us. Oh, Linda and Cliff. Haven't called the travel agent yet, but they did tell me they will go. So I'm kind of trying to drag a few people along with me. So. One last question, I believe.
Thank you, Ajahn. Yes, we have one last question. Question 3. Dear Ajahn, the path development attainment is in stages. Can one control or to halt at the once returnal stage and make a resolution or aspiration to be born and have the opportunity to meet the next Buddha and gain liberation then? Thank you.
I'm personally not at the level of anagami, so I can't explain it from the position of knowing. But an anagami is the third stage of enlightenment. Anagamis have no greed, no hatred. All that's left is a little bit of like latent tendency of perceiving things as a self, like a lotus that has petals. Like the one practitioner described it that he knew petals were petals and pistils were pistils, the stem was the stem. He constantly knew it, but there was still a sense of flower that pervaded the flower, still a fragrance of self. Anagami is like just that little bit of latent grasping at things as being a self. But I think if a person really was at the anagami stage, well, as as it's described, the anagami, if someone is attained anagami in the human state or deva state, they, in their next life, will go to what's called Sutawati, which is a pure land. It's a state higher than the Brahma realms. And it's so pure. There's occasions in the Buddha's life where he overheard a Brahma god having a conceited thought about how wonderful he was, because he knew everything. He could know anything in his realm, and if whatever he wanted to know in his realm and lower, he could know it, extend his consciousness to be aware of thoughts, extend his consciousness, various things that he could do. And the Buddha manifested in front of him and said, yeah, but you know what? There's realms above you that you can't even see. And this Brahma Deva said, no, I don't believe you. And so the Buddha went there. He said, okay, well, I'll go there and you try to find me. So he went up to this incredibly pure, refined state, realm. And the Brahma Deva couldn't find him. And he came back down and said, see, you don't know everything. So pretty cool. I like it when the Buddha is kind of shows off a little bit. But he doesn't do it out of vanity. He does it to teach. And but the point is, I think if you have no desire, no attachment to conditions, and just a little bit of latent tendency of perceiving things as a self, no greed at all, I think even the desire to be born in the time of the Buddha wouldn't be there anymore. The mind is already so close to Nibbana, and it's already existing in such a subtle state that, I mean, Lord Buddha says, those who see Dhamma see the Buddha. So the anagami is experiencing Dhamma and experiencing great serenity, great peace, great contentment, great fulfillment, and extremely subtle, only wholesome sense of self. So I actually don't think the anagami would have that desire. The anagami is already meeting the Buddha and experiencing Dhamma to such an extent that their level of contentment and happiness is higher than the Brahma god. So yeah, if you really want to meet a Buddha, you still have a bit of attachment left. It's a pretty wholesome place to put it. Then you need to do that before you become an anagami. So either that, you could become an anagami when you meet the Buddha, listen to his teachings, and the anagami is attained to arahantship in that life, in that pure land. It's kind of inevitable, destined, that they attain to arahantship in that life. So it's probably millions and millions. It's a nice reflection in a way. Millions and millions of anagaminis and arahants in a place called Sutawati. Sutawati, which is higher than Sukhawati. Sukhawati is the happy destinations. Sutawati is the pure destinations. So may we all experience it for ourselves through correct practice, realizing not self.
Sadhu. Thank you, Ajahn. Ajahn, I just received another question. Would you want to take a look?
Yep.
Okay, question 4. Ajahn, I find the Buddhist practice discipline in body, speech, and mind difficult. When I take on 8 precepts on Uposatha days, I get hungry easily and have lost a bit of weight. I heard from someone that practicing Buddhism is easy. How do I know if I'm practicing it correctly? Thank you.
I never heard from anybody that practicing Buddhism is easy. So But I don't want to emphasize that it's hard. If read the question to me again. I'm going to try to answer skillfully. Please read that again.
Ajahn, I find the Buddhist practice, discipline in body, speech, and mind difficult. When I take on the 8 precepts on Uposatha days, I get hungry easily and have lost a bit of weight.
Yeah.
I heard from someone that practicing Buddhism is easy. How do I know if I'm practicing it correctly?
Yep. So the starting place for our practice is an untrained mind affected by greed, by hatred, and delusion. That's where we start. And when you come to train in mindfulness and meditation, you're trying to wrestle with the delusion to increase clarity. When you keep your ethical precepts, you're containing the greed and the hatred. So, of course, it's difficult. One practitioner many years ago described it to me as being like trying to stop a freight train with one arm. You know, it's the Superman could do it. Like, you know, maybe Superman is an analogy for somebody who practiced a lot in past lives and has the spiritual powers to take it on. But for most of us, we have to work hard at cultivating the spiritual powers as the antidotes to the power of the kilesa. It is difficult. And, but you're in good company. So, all these nice people, smiling faces, trying to purify their minds. So if you read the biographies of the great masters, even though they had a lot of accumulated virtue, they all met with some pretty amazing challenges. Karma. So practice is difficult. And at the same time, practice is rewarding, practice is inevitable, you have no choice. So, and I think it is the case that I want to say it gets easier with time, but I'm not sure if that's true either. Because, you know, the various delusions that affect the mind, you become aware of them layers and layers, and it gets more and more subtle, and uprooting them. So practice probably becomes more subtle, and the suffering probably becomes more subtle as well. But it's probably still not easy. But it is rewarding. So the degree to which one can contain and weaken kilesa is, Ajahn actually says that. The degree to which there is suffering in your mind is the degree to which there is kilesa in your mind. So if practice means it's suffering, it's because there's kilesa in there. And when we keep precepts, we're containing them, and you know, there's all sorts of analogies. One is putting a lion in a cage, or a tiger in a cage, and it doesn't want to be in a cage. It's going to roar. It's going to bang against the bars. It's going. That's the, you know, the power of the restlessness, the power of the lust, the power of the irritation and aversion. There's power there. So practice can be difficult, and we need to have faith in our ability and confidence, trust, interest, enthusiasm for knowing where it's going. It's like these other statements, Lumpur Liam saying that purity is born from impurity. And there's all sorts of, you know, useful sayings that we can remind ourselves, like, count your rainbows, not your storms. That's nice. We have a lot of storms, right? And then, you get some insights from the way you suffer, and moments where you can put down your suffering and glimpse something beautiful, your potential. No mud, no lotus, right? Grist for the mill. It's when we work with the difficulties, this is something that we don't realize in the beginning, and it's one of the values of keeping up a practice over years. Is there's a line in the Awada Patimokkha the Buddha was talking about discipline, the teaching that he gave in the bamboo grove to the 1,250 arahants who spontaneously gathered. He said, patient endurance is the supreme incinerator of the defilements. So that's a pretty positive statement, but it also means that one is going to have to be patient and one is going to have to endure. And how it feels in the beginning, incinerating the defilements feels like the defilements are incinerating you. That's how it feels. And it's only through keeping it up, that one notices that the power in the mind is getting less. And how nice it is to not be completely pushed around and pulled around by them. And sometimes it's like the power of the kilesa are coming, and sometimes you can duck, sometimes you can jump, sometimes you can dodge. It's like Neo dodging the bullets, So yes, practice in the beginning is difficult, and that's probably how you know you're doing it correctly. So if it was too easy, I'd be suspicious. So. Keep going.
Thank you, Ajahn.
Take care.
Thank you, Ajahn. Thank you,
Thank
Ajahn.
you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Good to
Thank
see
you,
you all.
Ajahn.